Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. We're going to start the session off, but I think we probably have a few people who are still on their way to level 3 and room F, which was a big challenge for all of us, I know. So congratulations to everybody who joined online, because you made it first to the meeting before any of us in the room. My name is Rebecca Lewin, and I'm moderating the session today. I'm an independent consultant in the aid and development sector, and I've been a practitioner in supply chain operations for about the last 20 years. I'm joined today by a great panel. So I have Dr. Mojtaba Salem, who's a postdoctoral researcher with CORD and the Kuna Logistics University next to me here. I'm also joined in the room by Paul Machado, who's the Business Analytics and Research Coordinator with Hulo. Online, we're joined by Caitlin Boosman, Country Director for Concern Worldwide in Burkina Faso, and also by Sarah Aslan, who is the Officer in charge of Institutional Relations and Partnerships at CDCS, the Centre de Crise et de Soutien. So thank you very much for the panel today. Before we get started, let's learn a little bit more about the topic that we're here to discuss. So many of you are familiar already with the cooperative Hulo, the Humanitarian Logistics Cooperative, but I'm just going to take a few moments to introduce it to you for those who are less familiar. So what is Hulo, and where is it coming from? In fact, Hulo has been founded for the last few years by a number of logisticians and members in the humanitarian sector. I see something different on my screen. That's good. That's fine. And I want to talk a little bit about where it is now. So it's created by 9 humanitarian organizations in June 2021. And this was following several years of collaboration amongst the same group. We know that collaboration in our sector is not a new thing. And indeed, that's the reason why many of us are here this week. It's the first of its kind in the sense that it's a truly cooperative organization, connecting logistics stakeholders to improve the efficiency of humanitarian aid, and also to look at reducing our environmental impact by pooling resources. So lots of things that resonate with the topics of focus this week at HNPW around optimization, and particularly around efficiency of aid delivery. Hulo is offering a number of different things at the moment, including bringing partners together to optimize supply chain management, developing digital solutions, which we'll be exploring a little bit in our next session, and also joint initiatives in a very practical way in field country operations. But just to explain a little bit about where that's come from. So not that far. I can do it with this. So we all know that collaboration is not a new thing, and certainly logisticians, I think, have it within their DNA. We've been collaborating as long as we've had mobile phones and cigarettes and places to collaborate after work. But we've got a little bit better at it over the years, and we've certainly got better at doing it in a more structured and deliberate way. Sometimes with the aid of our organizations, and sometimes in spite of our organizations. I think we've always had that face towards collaboration and effectiveness. So the organizations there you can see on the left have been collaborating very actively, initially under the Réseau Logistique Humanitaire, commissioning research and studies together. We have research partners with us today, and that's certainly an approach that's not new to us. And then after a first few papers of research identifying the need for a more deliberate collaboration, the chief executives of those organizations said, okay, fine, prove to us that collaboration can be a business model that works. We'll give you 5 years worth of supply chain data. And I think if you can just imagine 5 years of our beautifully clean and wonderfully high quality supply chain data coming together to then look at the potential for efficiency gains. That was the first business case effectively for a joint procurement collaboration in the form of what then became Hulo. But then the second challenge was to look at the model that was going to work best. So we can have models of collaboration which are more structured, less structured, more formal, less formal. We wanted to try and find the governance mechanism that would really enable that collaborative initiative to last. And what was landed on was the cooperative model. And one of the reasons for that was it created a place where everybody was in it together, formally governed, and in a way that there was a mutual trust around what we were and weren't doing together. Shall I try here? Go for it. There we go. So the Hulo is made up of a number of member organisations, but this is just part of the picture. So these are the formal member organisations, and then in every country where Hulo is working at the moment, there are a huge number of participating organisations, those organisations who don't necessarily have to join the cooperative to benefit from the services that we are working on together. We have generous support from DG ECHO, from the European Union, and also from CDCS, from the French government, and from the United States government, from the Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance. So where are we now? In 2023, well, where we are now is that we can make nice graphics. So that's one advancement that we know for any organization is really critical. But no, in 2023, we have 63 organizations who participated in at least one joint initiative. So from 9 organizations working together to then having 63, including local organizations in countries, I think is quite an achievement in less than 3 years. So you can see there's a relatively small footprint at the moment. This is very much a stage where it's about consolidating and understanding, learning from what we've done in a handful of countries before we then move into a next chapter of trying to bring that to scale. I have some much smarter people than me on the panel today to talk about how we're doing that. We know that collaboration is a busy space, and the humanitarian ecosystem is one that is somewhat inaccessible and hard to navigate. This is really the concept that we want to try and explain here. As you may have heard of H2H or H4H, these different terms that are bandied around the sector in the last few years. The concept of this cooperative agreement is H with H. So it's not a service provision, it's not a separate entity from the humanitarian system, but rather trying to bring humanitarian actors together to collaborate more effectively and to ultimately deliver more impact with the resources that we have available. So with that, I've shown you my panel, and I'm now going to hand over to our first panelist, Mojtaba Salem. So to give you a little bit more of an introduction, Mojtaba is a postdoctoral researcher at the Centre for Humanitarian Logistics and Regional Development, or CORD as it is known without the mouthful, and the Cunha Logistics University. He holds a PhD in management and has been recognised for his research in the field of humanitarian logistics. Dr. Salem is a lead contributor to the research projects investigating the state of resource pooling in the humanitarian system. So, Dr. Mojtaba, what does the research community make of this new resource pooling approach? What can you tell us about what you're learning so far?
Thank you, Rebecca, for the kind introduction. I'm very honored to be on this panel. I would like to share with you the result of the work that I, together with my colleagues, have been doing over the last year. As Rebecca said, this research tries to take a broader look at the state of the concept of resource pooling in the humanitarian ecosystems, and we took a look at Hulo as a case study for this research. So I have just a few slides first to give you some highlights of the research that we have conducted over the last year. First, I wanted to give you something that Rebecca just in her last slides also highlighted. When we started to look into this concept, we tried to map out different initiatives, different collaboration initiatives that exist in the sector in order to be able to understand what do we exactly mean by resource pooling and what are other models that try to complement it. So we came out with 3 ways to define or map joint initiatives in the humanitarian sector. So first, Rebecca also alluded a little bit to this, the concept of common services. And in these concepts, there is a dedicated service provider, a humanitarian service provider, or it could be a commercial service provider that tries to provide consolidated solution to the humanitarian organizations. So this is an example of an organization, a business works with another business. And then another way to map some of the other initiatives is to see a situation where different organizations they try to group their resources and capacities in order to leverage them to maximize their benefits. So this means that these organizations work with each other, and that's the examples of edge with edge. Now, in this case, there are also different ways to see how this resource pooling or pooling process happens. Sometimes it happens in an informal manner, or it could be in a way that is a response to emergencies. So, and then in another way, sometimes organizations try to have or have a long-term commitment or commit that they would share resources, and it could be in the form of a cooperative. An example of that is Hulo. And in this study, we try to look at this form of resource pooling to better understand it, but also what we understand could be generalized to other aspects of resource pooling. So as I indicated, we looked at Hulo as a case study to understand these concepts. And we had first an empirical questions. When we talk about resource pooling, what do we mean? What are the resources that are pooled more frequently or less frequently? And on the top of that, what are the enablers and the factors that impede the implementation of resource pooling in the humanitarian ecosystem? What other actors can do? And by other actors, we mean, for example, donor agencies or even the private sector. Just a few information about how we did this. So it took us last year. So we started first to read the literature, use the academic literature to be able to come up with a framework that help us map different initiatives. And once we had a better understanding of what we want to focus, then we decided to conduct a survey. And this survey was, targeted organizations that had joint initiatives. So we wanted to hear from them. We had 57 responses from this survey, and I will share you the results of that in a minute. But this was the raw information for us. And in order to put that raw information into a form that is more meaningful, we then convened a workshop with 14 experts. And these experts came from different walks of different types of stakeholders, from donors, from commercial service providers, humanitarian logistics service providers, Hulo as well, academia, and donors. So that helped us to put together these survey statistics into a meaningful format. So I want to share you now some of the highlights from this survey and the workshop. So in terms of what are the resources that are being pooled, I apologize for this graph. Maybe it's a bit smaller. So we asked about the typical resources that has to do with supply chain, for example, warehousing, transportation, procurement. So in the survey, what we found out that the majority of the respondents, they did not engage in resource pooling in a consistent manner, which indicates that there is still room for improvement in this area. But of those organizations that engaged, the most common resources that were pooled were was in warehousing and transportation. And when we talked, we run this information through the workshop. The way we could make sense of this is that these are the type of resources that are easiest to share in an informal manner, or in a way that that the people in the field can get together and come up with an agreement to do that. But when it comes to procurement, that's a different story, because for procurement, as well as for other type of resources such as personnel or office space, we need professional processes in place in order to facilitate that sort of collaboration between organizations. They have different quality standards, for example, and it cannot usually be done in an informal manner or for short term. There needs to be systems, frameworks, agreements, a lot of regulation in place in order to facilitate that resource pooling. So that already gives an indication of where the focus needs to be in terms of ensuring that if resource pooling is going to happen, where do we need to focus? These are the areas like procurement or administrative resources, such as human resources and office space. We also wanted to know what are the factors that would make it difficult to engage in resource pooling. So three main issues that came out from the workshops. They had to do with the process issues. So the first thing is the issue of feasibility. Is it possible to engage in resource pooling while making sure that the organizations abide by by the internal standards. Well, this is a work in progress. So we have the example of Hulo. This provides a proof of concepts, but more needs to be done. This process needs to be scaled up in order for more organizations to see that there is feasibility. In addition to that, compliance issues. Is resource pooling in compliance with donor requirements? We have donors, donor agencies, at least the big ones that are supportive of these concepts. DJ ECO had a humanitarian logistics policy that supported this concept, but are the policies aligned with requirements, operational requirements and procedures? And that's an area where more work needs to be done in order to make sure that they are consistent. And that doesn't prevent organizations from engaging in resource pooling. And ultimately, the efficiency focus. When people talk about resource pooling, there is a exclusive or somewhat exclusive focus on creating efficiencies. That may be the case. Indeed, there could be cost savings from these. This is the topic of investigations that other colleagues with us will have in their report. But what is important that the only benefit from resource pooling cannot be efficiency. It could be other issues. For example, dealing with frauds and corruptions when we separate the procurement process from the purchase. It could have to do with also quality standards, because if multiple organizations want to do a joint tender and then some organizations have a better quality standards, it would be a situation of marrying upward, so that all organizations will have better standards. That may not necessarily lead to efficiencies because there may be more costs involved in it, but this is another indicator that the organization can look for. So too much focus on efficiency may actually create challenges to engage in resource pooling. There are also three key challenges that we term behavior-oriented challenges, and these have to do sometimes with perceptions. So the fear of losing control, because organizations need to share with each other data, accounting data, for example, or other types of data, and they may feel that they're losing control over their operations. So sometimes these fears are only perceptions, because people may not actually understand how to do it. And once the skill sets are created and capacities are built, then they may not have that concerns. But as discussed in the workshop, sometimes there are issues that have to do with trust, and the trust needs to be built, and it is built on the proof of concept. So again, the more we see that kind of models and initiatives, the more organizations can have trust that this model, this concept works, and they may be open to it. And ultimately, another challenge that could be somewhat somewhat impeding the implementation of resource pooling is the issue of relying on personal connections. Thus far, this has been an initiative. There's been a lot of experimental issues where people try to engage in these rather new way of working, and that has been done through people who knew each other, who trusted also personally each other that this would work. But if you want to scale this up, it needs to go beyond personal connections. The process needs to be institutionalized. So the initiatives that are involved in resource pooling, such as Hulo, they need to create systems and procedures even more to bring in more members. So, and my last slide is to take a bigger pictures of what are the roles of different actors in the ecosystem who could facilitate resource pooling. So the first actors, if you look at, for example, the cooperative, the Hulo cooperative, what needs to be done based, and these are coming again from the consensus in the workshop that we did, is to understand what would be the way forward in terms of operational continuity. As I indicated, there's been a lot of experiments, there's a lot of learning by doing, because this is a new concept, particularly in the humanitarian sphere. And the way forward is to define the value proposition, understand what is the business model, so that it becomes very clear for people who engage in it. And one example was the air bridge that, for example, Hulo was providing. Now, this is not resource pooling. This was a common service. And people need to understand the differences between these two models. And in the future, this needs to be clarified. When it comes to the role of donors, they play an instrumental role in incentivizing organizations. So as these joint initiatives, such as Hulo, mature, they become bigger, the donors play a role in the form of incentivizing organizations to join. And this is possible by reforming their grant structures. Because if we say that the motivation for organization to engage in any type of joint initiative, right, is to create efficiency, but are they awarded when they save on their grants? And that was a big question in the workshop. Can they actually, or are they sort of penalized? They need to respond to the donor. Why haven't they spent the money that they got on the grant? So there needs to be some flexibility there. But of course, the concern from the donor side is whether that money will be reinvested in building the supply chain capacity in the organization. And that means a closer dialogue between different stakeholders, the donors, the joint initiatives, the humanitarian organizations, to come up with an agreement, with a mechanism that ensures that that the incentives will be put in place for organizations to go in on the direction of joint initiatives, and the organizations will make sure that whatever saving that happens will be in support of joint initiatives. And ultimately, one positive spillover impact of engaging in joint initiative was the engagement with the private sector. And that's an interesting aspect. So a couple of weeks ago in our institution, we had an open day, and there was a panel on the humanitarian operation, and the country director from the World Food Program was there, and he said that 95% of their downstream operations are conducted by the private sector. That's an important figure to say, because private sector plays, in the case that private sector plays an important role. So there needs to be a clear understanding of how private sector and the humanitarian actors can engage with each other. And one way that that's possible is through joint initiatives, because from the private sector point of view, it's much easier for them to develop a relationship with the collective of organization than to have that relationship with individual humanitarian organizations. So that's one way that they can then transfer their knowledge in terms of the expertise that they have. So that the more joint initiative happens, the more it is likely that the engagement with private sector becomes better. So these are some insights from the workshops, and we will have them explain them in the report that will be releasing by the end of the month on the same concept. This would be the first of the 3 report series that our institution will release over this year. And hopefully you will find this helpful, and we can discuss more on this.
Thank you very much, Mujtaba. Before you turn your microphone off, so I'm just interested, you mentioned around the need for a certain level of formality to enable collaboration. How do you see that going forward then? What would be the next research questions that you would like answered in that area?
Well, as I said, that's what we realized, that in some supply chain processes, if we talk about resource pooling, that has been happening informally for many years, and it will continue to do so. But for some of the processes, it's very difficult to rely on informal or short-term measures, and there needs to be proactively processes put in place. For example, in doing a joint tender, organizations have different quality standards. So the question is, what are those mechanisms, and how we can ensure that we have optimal mechanisms that can bring this organization together so that they agree, because they have different mandates, different operational focus, different quality standards, and that's a lot of work, and we need to understand what are the levers, and so it would be a natural research question to basically delve deeper into that topic, understand what are the levers and the incentives on the side of different organizations, big one, smaller one, and then make sure that we embed them within the framework agreements and the mechanisms for these joint initiatives, such as Hulo, to then create the coordination.
Great, thank you very much. I'm going to move on now and introduce our second panelist, Machado is a humanitarian supply chain and logistics expert with more than 15 years experience. He's currently holding the role of Business Analytics and Research Coordinator, which is more commonly known as the BAR, but it's less interesting than it sounds in that respect, unfortunately. They have very little alcohol. For the Hulo cooperative. So he oversees all of the activities relating to monitoring, evaluation, business analytics, and operational research. So we've seen that external perspective now, Paul. So what's your perspective? We're very curious to hear from inside the cooperative. I know you've just recently published the first annual impact report. What impact are you seeing that you've been able to measure so far?
Okay, thank you so much. It's a little bit unfair to pass after Mojtaba because we are working together and I provide all the insight. But yes, we have published the first annual impact report in a few weeks ago. It's available on our LinkedIn account, so you have a QR code, so you can go directly to our website. It's an external version. So it's very summarized, very abstract of the internal versions that we shared with our members because we are a cooperative and our members are the owners of the cooperatives. So definitely the internal version have much more insight, is borrowing 50 pages of insight, findings, graphics, less pictures, and a lot of boring tables. But we had a lot of finding in it. Even if it's just the first one, just after 1 year of operation, we are able to learn a lot. On the external version, we just focus on 3 main findings on the project. The first one is you have the findings at the operational level, tactical level, and strategic level. And the first one is more operational level. And everyone was expecting that. Do we save money? Do we have financial savings by doing a joint approach altogether, knowing that it's very complicated to work together? And the findings by analyzing, just focusing on the joint procurement initiative, which is a kind of joint initiative to do a market assessment with 5, 6 NGOs, they all agree to do that on a common approach. We analyze the first purchase order released, and by December 2023, sorry, I want to be precise, we were able to analyze a little bit more than €500,000 of purchase order that the participants share with us, and knowing that we compare with their own baseline, with their own data, and we include that in our business analytics system. And we were able to find that we have an average savings of 15%, 1-5. It's much higher than what we were expecting. We were like, original hypothesis, it was more around 5-6%, depend. But we have to be very cautious on the figure because it's just $500,000 of expenditure. It's just the 3 first mission, proof of concept. We do believe that in the next annual impact report we will release in January 2025, we will have much more data and the steps will be smoother on that. But we analyze why it was so high. So we find that the procurement intelligence helps. The supplier were very happy about this project. So yes, financial savings, that confirmation on the first data. The second insight was about to more behavioral, more on the way that the logistic coordinators, the practitioners on the field were working together. It was quite new for them. And we observed that when they started all together to analyze the market with our support in terms of procurement intelligence, etc., the first priority was all the time, we have to save money, we have to do financial savings, etc., etc. But step by step, by working together, when you put 5-6 logistic coordinators, assessing a market, following all the stage of an open national tender, we realized that financial savings was less and less a priority for them. And more, because the peer pressure, when you are with the logistic coordinator of Acted, Plan International, you want to show your expertise, and sometimes by doing the market assessment and taking the time to do it, because sometimes we have a lack of time on the field, they put all the corporate social responsibility requirement, environmental, etc., as a new priority. And we observed this behavior in Burkina Faso, but at the meantime in Central Africa. It was very, very interesting to observe that. And even if we still have savings, they were really focusing more and more on the quality of the item and the service, which is good for the beneficiary, the reliability of the suppliers to check really, really the let's say the tax exemption, all the administrative dossier, and to take really the time to check it, all related to corporate social responsibility, and really to focus all together on their supply chain resilience, even if they have to pay more in terms of unit price. And that is very interesting to see this change when there is a joint approach among practitioners, that the financial savings takes the seat back, and the corporate social responsibility and the supply chain resilience become a priority. And that is very interesting. We continue to follow this trend through our monitoring and evaluation, field evaluation. The third findings, and the last one, which is for me the most important in fact for the members, because it's very strategic, is even if we created a framework, business analytics, procurement intelligence, a kind of ecosystem to help practitioners to do joint initiative. It's not just about joint procurement initiative. We have joint HR initiative, joint environmental initiative, etc., etc. We realized by December 2023 that we had only, for the joint procurement initiative, 500,000. We were expecting 2 million, according to our data. Just 2 joint HR initiatives, when we know that it's a no-brainer. Everyone likes this kind of initiative. And we have 100% of satisfaction rate, which is quite rare on that. So why is taking so long to take off? It's relative because we are very young. It's the first year of operations that we analyze, of course. And by doing radical thinking, by doing our evaluation, by asking questions through semi-structured interview to participants, we realize that, in fact, we are asking them to do things that they are not trained to do. Even if we say that for logistician practitioners on the field, to share resources, to work together is quite natural. For the internal organizational culture, it's not in the DNA of the organization. And we have a lot of practitioners who are telling us that I want to join this joint HR initiative, but when I talk to my HR coordinator, my finance coordinator, first, he doesn't know what is Hulo. He doesn't know about pooling. And, with the professionalization of a humanitarian action, they are used to dive into their SOP, guideline, procedure, policy paper. And most of the organization, they don't have nothing written about pooling resources in their internal guideline. And we have a lot of organizations that participate and they say, no, my compliance department is telling me that I don't know what is this way of working. It's not compliant for our internal procedure, etc., etc. We have much more insight, use case, but just the fact that this new way of working, perhaps now in Geneva, in Brussels, is quite mainstream, is a no-brainer to pool resources, but our proof of concept shows that, in fact, it's not in the DNA of the organization. And that is normal because since decades, this organization, the humanitarian organization, have built a strong internal identity based on autonomy, independence, their expertise, technical expertise, to do standalone activity. And now we are asking them to share and to pool their expertise, their resources. And on the field with practitioners, some of them are very paralyzed because I don't have a SOP who explain me if I can do that, even if I know that it will be very fruitful for my organization and for the community. And that is the most important finding of this report, I do believe.
Thanks, Paul. An interesting parallel there. I reflect from Mustaba's comments about the need for this to be an organizational commitment rather than just individuals committing with goodwill. And perhaps that's echoed in your findings there, that there really needs to be more of an organizational approach to embedding that change. Do you think that's one of the key enablers to moving forward on this model?
Well, based on our annual impact report, we are able to adapt, update our strategy. That's why we have our performance and impact measurement framework. It's not just to have a lot of KPI, very nice, and dashboard. No, it's really to support the top management, the members, the practitioner, to redesign and to adapt the cooperative strategy. And we realize that the technical issue, we are solving it step by step with a toolkit prepare with to support the organization, to update some SOP, MOU, etc., to build a trustful environment about sharing data, for example, with policy paper, data governance policy paper, etc. But we realize that now we have to move from, even if we continue, of course, to deliver the toolkit and the technical and to answer to all the technical issue, we have to move to the change management. And that is a real need for the practitioner and for the organization. We have to structure the way we support pooling resources to the organization, because each organization, humanitarian organization, how to say that, have their own specificities. So we cannot answer to everyone. We cannot support everyone. If we try to do that, Hulo will become too big. Okay, but that's why the most important now is to assist also on the change management for this organization, to onboard and to welcome the pooling, the sharing resources in their DNA. And that is very at a strategic level. And after the practitioners, it will ease them, support them to onboard on this project and to have a real impact at the end.
Thank you very much. So we've heard from a couple of different perspectives now, and we're now going to hopefully transition smoothly to one of our remote panel members. So I'd like to introduce you to Caitlin Boseman, who's been working in the Sahel for over 10 years after studying international development and biology at the University of Waterloo in Canada. So during the last 10 years, she's worked with a variety of humanitarian and development organizations on business development, program implementation, program quality, and then in leadership. She's been in Burkina Faso for the last 6 years and is the country director for Concern Worldwide in Burkina. And Concern, although not a member of the cooperative, was one of the first members of Hulo in Burkina Faso and has been actively involved in its initiatives over the past few years. So let's take a concrete perspective, if we can, from you, Caitlin. I'm interested, what changes are you seeing as a result from this collaborative approach so far, and what made those changes happen? And hopefully we'll see you on screen in just a moment. Yes, perfect.
Great. Well, it's nice to be a part of this. It's nice to join you. So first, just briefly, for those of you who are not familiar with Burkina Faso, it's a country since 2018 or so has been falling into a significant humanitarian crisis, increasingly severe. And as a result, a lot of humanitarian NGOs have been installing themselves in the country from 2019 to 2021, just fairly recently. And other NGOs who were already present in Burkina started working more and more in humanitarian activities. So this was at the same time an opportunity for Hulo. I believe that having a lot of humanitarian NGOs coming into the country at the same time and all starting to try to figure out how to work, this was an opportunity that was an interesting context to start working. So Concern also arrived at more or less at this time in 2021, at the same time as Hulo was starting in the country. One of the biggest challenges to start with was just getting started. Like one of the panelists mentioned earlier, there's a lot of personal relationships that are a part of putting in place the network. And I think that this was the biggest challenge to start with, getting a lot of the organizations on board outside of the member founding organizations, but other international and national organizations to try to get adhesion towards Hulo and the idea, and especially with turnover as well. A lot of country directors that had been leaving or arriving, logistics coordinators who had been arriving, and so on. Each time a new person came in, there was really a lot of work that had to be done by the Hulo coordinator in country to try to bring them on board. And to get buy-in really on the whole system. So we've been involved, Concern Worldwide has been involved with a number of joint procurement initiatives in Burkina on purchasing NFI kits, fortified flour, materials for visibility for organizations, We've also been involved in some of the environmental impact activities that have been organized by Hulo in Burkina, particularly with sorting waste and working with an associations who's working to recycle and reuse a lot of the garbage that's produced. Other initiatives we have not been involved in, but that's the whole idea of Hulo. We can participate in certain things that are prioritized for our organization, and we don't need to participate in every single initiative that comes through. I think some of the key lessons that I've learned from Hulo over the past few years has been that it really does require active involvement from the different member organizations. It is a cooperative. Everybody needs to contribute. Hulo has a role really in coordination, in bringing the people together to perform the procurement processes, but each organization also has to contribute, bringing people together, bringing their logistics team forward, bringing their programs teams as well, so they participate in this process. The engagement also, it's very important that it comes from the top of the organization. It can't just be a logistics coordination mechanism. It's really the country directors or country representatives that have to be involved in Hulo. If they're not invested in Hulo, then they're not going to get the buy-in from their other teams. The logistics teams alone cannot do the procurement processes. You have your programs team who have to provide technical specifications for what they're looking for. Communications teams who have to participate. So it's really, if you don't have that support from the country directors in the member organizations, it's not going to work out. And I think another lesson is also that people are very key. We were lucky in Burkina to have had a very good coordinator to start with, who is very well networked with a number of international NGOs and was able to build relationships between these organizations. So he used that engagement to expand the network quite quickly. And we moved from 9 organizations when Hulo first started working in Burkina to 24 now. We have 20 international organizations and 4 national NGOs that are a part of the cooperative in Burkina. I think overall, this really helped us as an organization member. Concern because we started in Burkina fairly recently. We started out with a very small team and didn't have the human resource capacity to run a thorough procurement process on our own. Just having that support with other organizations, working with other technical specialists in the field that provided expertise that we needed without having to depend fully on our internal human resources. That was really an opportunity for us as an organization. Again, the impact also, it depends on what effort is put into the process, whether it be from the start of the year where we identified the different priorities that the different organizations are interested in. We identified together a number of different possibilities. And then as the different members of Hulo, we decided on which ones are the ones we want to move forward with throughout the year, which procurement processes or other collaborative processes we want to participate in. I think another indirect impact possibly from Hulo is that it really encouraged a spirit of mutualization between the NGOs that are working in Burkina, and particularly the members. You've seen a lot more sharing of resources outside of the procurement processes and so on, doing more carpooling, doing more sharing of other resources of the organization that allow us to work more efficiently and more effectively as well. I think I can confirm some of the challenges that were raised by the other panelists as well. It's a new way of working. There is sometimes this idea of losing control of the process. You're losing control of the procurement, and you're having to let go of certain parts of how it's done internally, and allowing other organizations to participate in the same process. But that's also an advantage as well. We learn new processes. We're able to adapt what we're doing, try to find best practices from other partner organizations, and that helps us to also develop and grow as an organization. One of the other challenges that might come up, I think, it's a question for reflection as well in Burkina, is what is the right size for a cooperative in a country? We started with 9 members. We're at 24 now in Burkina. And because you need to have this active participation from the members, not in every single process, but each of the members has to participate actively in some of the processes. If you don't have that active collaboration and active participation, then you really lose the idea of the cooperative. So at what point do you get to a large enough size that you say we're not getting that participation anymore and everybody is just trying to kind of ride along on the train? It's good to have a lot of participation because you have more cost saving, you have more efficiencies overall. But where is that good that position where you have enough partners but not too many as well? I think that's just to summarize really some of the experience I'm working at so far.
Thanks, Caitlin. So maybe just throw your own question back at you. What is the right size then?
So far, it's working quite well in Burkina, even with the 24 organizations, and there are some other ones that we're working to bring on board as well. We only have 4 national NGOs, but there are a few other national NGOs that we're discussing with to try to see if we can bring them on board. Going too much past that, I think, would be a challenge. Maybe 30 organizations, maybe 35. It depends really on the context in the country and so on. But when you start to see there are other NGO platforms in Burkina where you have 50 or 60 members, and getting everybody around the same table is a really big challenge. Trying to bring everyone together in that same way, it becomes difficult when you get to that size.
And you mentioned around, I mean, as a country director, you're dragged into coordination mechanisms and meetings pretty much on a weekly basis, I imagine. So what makes this different from other types of coordination mechanisms? What makes it valuable for you, and how does it differ?
Yeah. This is really, I would say, from a country director level, it's more strategic. Yes, you have a lot of coordination that's very in the field or very very operational. Our role in the Hulo Cooperative is more strategic, to say, yes, we think it is strategic. We think it's important to do. What are our priorities for the year? After 6 months, where are we at with our different priorities? How are things moving forward? We're not as involved in the day-to-day operations of the procurement processes and so on. So it's not as time consuming, to be fair, as a country director in this process, but it is looking at the larger picture and to say, how can we work together better as international and national NGOs?
Thank you. We're going to come back to you at the end, Caitlin, so don't go away,
Sure.
but thank you very much. Which brings me to our final panelist. I'd like to introduce Sarah Aslan, who for the last 2 years has been the officer in charge of institutional relations and partnerships at the Humanitarian and Stabilization Operations Center of the Crisis and Support Center of the Ministry for Europe and Foreign Affairs. In particular, she works on cross-cutting issues relating to the French Republic's humanitarian strategy, 2023 to 2027, and on monitoring relations with the European Union on a range of themes, including climate and logistics. Welcome, Sarah. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's a great pleasure to have you on board. I know that the French government, via CDCS, has been a major supporter of this new initiative since the very beginning. You've stuck with Hulo from the beginning until now, and I know how valuable that has been and critical to helping this get off the ground. So how does this align to your strategic agenda? What do you see as the role of donors in this? We look forward to hearing your insights.
Hi everyone, thank you very much, Rebecca, and thank you very much as well to Hulo for organizing this very interesting panel. I'm very pleased to take part in. So firstly, I would like to take a quick look on how we started working with Hulo and why they are such an important partner for us today. So the Hulo Cooperative, which we supported when it was the Humanitarian Logistics Network, was supported by the Crisis and Support Center through the first edition of a call for projects dedicated to humanitarian innovation in 2021. So the aim of this call for projects is to improve the effectiveness of humanitarian action by encouraging the implementation of high impact support solutions. So this means that we want to support the development of innovative projects compared with existing tools to enhance the effectiveness of action in several sectors, which were updating every year. So, for instance, in 2004, we were more specifically supporting climate change, gender issues, as well as the protection of humanitarian workers and of civilians. So this call for project also aims to encourage the implementation of shared approaches and the development of synergies between humanitarian actors to contribute to the transformation of practices and the overall evolution of the sector. So we supported Hulo in 2021 for a project to enhance and strengthen collaborative approaches and mutualization within humanitarian procurement and operational logistics, as it was in line with the objectives of the call for project. And we had then continued our partnership with Hulo, initially for the development of an application which was aimed at reinforcing data sharing between humanitarian actors, and then by contributing to the DG ECHO's logistics capacity. So today, Hulo represents a partner that really enables us to actively contribute to the implementation of our humanitarian logistics commitments, but not only. Firstly, for logistics, as shown in the annual impact report of Hulo, logistics and the supply chain account for 50 to 60% of global humanitarian spending. So the challenges of logistics and joint approaches are very major ones for donors in order to guarantee aid effectiveness and meet the growing challenges of aid financing. So this is why funding humanitarian innovation was part of the French Humanitarian Strategy 2023 and 2027 that we launched at the National Humanitarian Conference on December 2023. The mutualization of logistics also makes it possible for us to respond to the challenge of the greening of humanitarian aid. We are constantly reminded that many humanitarian crises are directly caused by climatic crises, and it's necessary for donors to ensure that we do not further deteriorate the living conditions of the populations for whom we implement these logistical operations by reducing the environmental impact of humanitarian aid. And in addition of that, investing in humanitarian logistics is a way for donors to implement the Humanitarian Donors Declaration for the Environment and Climate that was launched in March 2022 during the first European Humanitarian Forum, which was organized under the French presidency of the EU Council. All EU member states have signed this declaration, so it will seem very coherent for us to collectively step up our investment in terms of logistics, given its structural importance in terms of greening, but also in terms of economies of scale. Regarding the obstacle to collaboration and the role of donors in supporting organization in this transformation, there is firstly an issue about the visibility of organizations implementing collaborative approaches. So with this in mind, but also to support the scaling up of initiatives funded through the Call for Project, we maintained a regular dialogue with DG ECHO on humanitarian innovation. And therefore, the co-financing with DG ECHO of the Hulo's project on strengthening collaborative and pooling approaches has first permitted to encourage European synergies, but also for Hulo to gain visibility within the humanitarian community. Secondly, we think that it's also the role of organization to integrate the main challenges of the sectors, such as the integration of local humanitarian actors as much as possible, and to rely more on local markets in order to better address the concerns of the sector. So the implementation of joint approaches with local actors can help to strengthen their resilience when facing climatic shocks, and also to reduce the aid footprint. And also, just as it was said, donors need to sensitize about how investing in joint approaches and logistics can enable the donors community to really operationalize their humanitarian commitments. So yeah, to conclude, I would say that donors have an important role to play in promoting these initiatives to address the sector's main challenges in terms of localization, climate change, but also about the funding gap.
Thank you very much, Sarah. That's very insightful. And speaking about the funding gap, why do you think it is such a challenge for us to make these investments and to invest in something which is maybe going to give a return in a cooperative model or in a collaborative model a little bit further down the road? Why is that such a challenge for organizations and for our donors?
We know that we are facing an increasing funding gap, and that we also are struggling with broadening the donor base. So it's really important for organizations to develop more and more collaborative approaches to reduce the funds, to face the reduce of funds, but not only in the sector of logistics, but also in many other sectors that I just mentioned. For instance, on localization, we support the START network that you may know. It's an NGO that works with, I think, 200 organizations, including many local and national players. And the mechanisms developed by the START networks are used to pre-position funding to respond more rapidly to foreseeable crises, particularly those of climatic origin, and also to release contingency funds in case of sudden crisis. So in both cases, the funds are managed directly by START network members, which permit to delegate decision-making to local and national players. So that was for localization, but we also support other projects based on collaborative approaches for the protection of humanitarian workers, for the better protection of data, to reduce the impact of climate change on humanitarian action. And in general, we noticed that several organizations already have their own international policies on how to reduce the impact of aid, how to take better account of gender issues, while other organizations were still struggling to integrate these issues into the design and the implementation of the projects. So we think that the development and the investment of donors in collaborative approaches could really help humanitarian actors, international and local, to help each other improve the effectiveness of their action by sharing best practices as well as their respective expertise in order to better respond to the multiplication of crises as well as to the growing needs.
Thank you. That's very clear, and thank you so much for your comments today. I'm sure we'll be coming back to you in the questions, but thank you once again to the French government. It's great to see your support to this range of collaborative and cooperative initiatives, and I hope that it becomes more and more contagious in the broader donor community in the future. But thank you for your support. So it's time now that we can thank our panel and come to questions. I will come first of all to the room. If anybody has any questions here in the room for any of the panel members. Please don't be shy. Yeah, please go ahead. If you press the button and your microphone should light up.
All right, I managed the first technical things. Thank you so much, all of you, for your interventions. Actually, I was wondering, and also related to the intervention of the country director of Burkina Faso, how do you envisage in Hulo the integration and collaboration with local actors, knowing that I guess it started with international organization, and how do you envision this transition into getting the support and collaborating more and more at local level? Thank you.
Great question, thank you. Yeah, so Caitlin, we're coming back to you, I'm afraid, if you could just fix the problem of localization for us and how that works, that would be great. How do you see that moving forward, certainly in the short to medium term, for a greater representation of local organizations?
Yeah, definitely. It's very important and not an easy question to fix. I think already we've been very intentional from the start. Hulo in Burkina has been very intentional from the start. As soon as the organization came in place with the 9 initial organizations that were members, right away they started to say, okay, who are your national NGO partners? What are other larger NGOs, national NGOs that we can start working with, at least to get us, get a foot in the door. Identifying who are the key players with national NGOs, and also what are their key needs. For example, we were talking about what are the types of purchases that we often do overseas. Our laptops and other IT material, often international NGOs do that overseas. But we said, it's important that we do in Burkina, we include that in our procurement process, because the national partners, they could benefit a lot more from that. So just being more intentional to say, what are the types of procurement processes that we're going to do together? And continuing to try to sell the idea to national partners, to be intentional going towards them. I think there's less of an effort now to go towards international NGOs. The people who are interested and willing, they came towards Hulo at the beginning, or that was the initial process. But really now, the work of trying to recruit additional members is with national NGOs to say, who else is interested? How can we get them on board? How can we cater to their needs? And adapt the approach to be more adapted to what they're looking for. Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you very much. That does sound like a tricky one to fix, but it sounds like Burkina Faso is heading in the right direction. Thank you. Bassam?
My question is for Caitlin as well. Caitlin, as a country director, if your teams, your country's resources are going to be invested in this collaboration, how would you like to measure the success of the collaboration? Like what would value added for concern look like? So if I'm going to go to my CDs in NRC, I work for NRC, by the way, and tell them, hey, we need to collaborate. It's better for us. It is beneficial to NRC. What kinds of KPIs would I suggest to them as CDs to demonstrate the value add of collaborating with Hulo?
I think the easiest one is the cost efficiencies. So there's been quite a bit of work done by Hulo to say, okay, what were we paying initially for this NFI package with our suppliers before we did the process with Hulo? What are we paying now? What percentage decrease or increase are we seeing? And I think almost all the organizations in Burkina saw a decrease, some more than others. Some were almost 20%, others were 10%, 5%, but almost everyone saw a decrease in what they were paying for some of these larger procurement processes, where we're purchasing a lot of kits or a lot of materials. I think part of it is also the collaboration, getting to know what the other organizations are doing, what are good practices that they're doing in their logistics processes. Our logistics team have really appreciated it. Our systems director and our logistics coordinator, to be able to have other contacts that are doing similar processes in other organizations, having that network of logistics specialists that gives them people to talk to when they have questions or when they have concerns, even outside of Hulo processes and so on. Having that network that they're building just at that technical level has been helpful. So I think that's another point that can be a selling factor, let's say, to other organizations. it's, yeah, overall, I think it's also looking at some initiatives together. I mean, saying that environmental efficiency and improving environmental impact has been a priority for a number of donors and a number of organizations. So to see what other organizations are doing on that front, the garbage waste selection and working with an association on recycling and so on and reusing certain waste. That was an initiative that some organizations had been involved in already previous to Hulo, but because Hulo was kind of a platform bringing together a bunch of international organizations and national as well, that created an opportunity for others to say, okay, we will join. We can participate in this as well. It's not difficult. It's quite easy for us to get on board. So just some opportunities that otherwise we might not have paid attention to, or we might have not have invested the time and effort into doing that. Just having one or two organizations that were already doing it, and then having the cooperatives kind of take over to say, okay, we'll facilitate the connections with these different partners and this process, and then it makes it easier for us to go into that.
And failing that, you just get Caitlin to give them a call. I think that's the answer, right? No, it's great, and I'm joking, but it is great to hear personal testimony, particularly from a country director in a logistics platform. I think 5-10 years ago we wouldn't really have that opportunity to hear so positively from leadership community in a country about the benefits of this mechanism and of cooperation. So thank you. You've all been very gentle on us so far. Any other questions in the room? Hulo founding members are excluded from that request. In which case, yeah, go ahead, please. You just press your button on your mic, do you mind? And then everyone can hear you. Perfect.
Hello, hi. Dana Yaari from Monday.com's emergency response team. And I was curious to hear a little bit more about the challenges that you guys face when you're operating in the field or when you're supporting different organizations or working around partnerships and collaboration. Or maybe the opportunities, that you have instead of challenges. Let's go with opportunities.
Paul, would you like to reflect on that, of what you found when you've been traveling around?
Well, I can start with challenge. It's just to which one. And Hulo, sorry, I will be a little bit of boring, but Hulo is a cooperative. So which place it not like other humanitarian organization, it's a meta organization. So the owner of this organization are other organizations. So there is a lot of inertia sometimes to take some decision, etc., because as a cooperative is based on the consensus. And on the first year, we try to test some kind of local governance. We have the Global Engagement Committee, and we have the Local Engagement Committee, the practitioner where they represent. And we face some kind of inertia on the decision making, which strategy, etc. And on the first year, we realize, and that is one of the main challenges, what type of best balanced governance we need on the field. It's working quite well at the international level, but on the national level, we felt that after 3 months that it's complicated. There is a lot of inertia. What we were expecting in few weeks take few months, and then the project become a little bit more costly, etc., in terms of resources, time, and not just financial. And we realize that sometimes we ask to the practitioners, the logisticians, the logistic coordinator, to position their organization on strategic decision where they do not have the data, in fact. Usually the logisticians are very good to tell you what happened, but sometimes they're not really involved in the strategy design of their organization. I'm not saying that is the same for all the organizations, they're all different. But we realize that in fact, we have to onboard in priorities a country director because they have the strategic visions. They know what is upcoming in 2-3 years, and they can drive the logistic coordinator. The logistic coordinator, they are the one who managed on a daily basis these working groups, this cooperative burden administration, etc. And they propose a strategy, they propose action, joint initiative, opportunities to the country director. And the country director are the right one to have the leadership and to decide to make the final decision in terms of strategy. That the first challenge we faced was the local governance. To say it's one of many challenges, but no, we are quite busy with national challenges.
I think that's probably accompanied, the wave of decentralization of decision making that we've seen across the NGO sector in the last decade, rightly so. But now that we can have that buy-in and that HQ level organization commitment, but that also needs to be complemented by that governance and buy-in at a country level as well. Mushtaba, would you have to add to that?
Yeah, on the question of challenges, if we again take a zoom out and take a bigger look at the bigger picture, we see that the organization needs to align their internal procedures to make the environment conducive to engage in resource pooling. And one of the challenges there is the culture needs to be adopted, the procedure needs to be adopted, but the volume of the work that the organizations dedicate to resource pooling may not be big at this stage. So this change management needs to happen. There needs to be a critical mass. If the organization is deeply involved in the cooperative or in generally joint initiatives, then you have a better, faster changes. And we need to get to that point. And that's the process. That's the working process. Hulo being an example, other initiatives as well. But that volume needs to be there, because if it's a smaller part of the volume, then what is in it for the organization to change the internal procedure, to change the culture, and that also needs leadership at the top as well to promote the culture. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to ask you to press that button again. Perfect. Neil, did I see your hand up?
Yes, and I'll still continue in the vein of gentle questions, so don't be afraid. Yeah, I'm Neil from the International Rescue Committee. So my first question, if I get two, that's fine. But the first one would be for Dr. Salem. I think your research was really insightful. And it's really good to see Hulo partnering with a neutral academic partner, so that we have some objectivity in the measurement of what's going well and lessons learned, etc. So the question I had for you is, what do you foresee as the future research or the future thought partnership that CORD is going to be conducting along with Hulo? If you could give us some insights as to what we can expect from CORD, what kind of rigor is going to be there, what kind of challenge is going to be there as well, rather than saying yes to everything. What's your vision for the partnership?
Thank you. I can answer in two ways. The first is if we look at the future of joint initiative for researchers and academia is to really understand how do these initiatives such as Hulo complement the bigger picture. Because as I showed in one of the slides, I think it was my first slides, we have different types of initiatives, from common services to resource pooling, and then the strategic nature of resource pooling to a short term. So there's some platforms and initiatives that also enable resource pooling, but maybe in an informal manner in a short term. So the question is, as we grow, as the initiatives mature, how do they complement each other? And is the threats that they overlap? And then the question is, at the top level, the people who make decisions needs to have this dialogue to make sure that they complement, right? To reduce the danger that there's an overlap. And that also leaves the room for academia to get in and to do this evidence-based analysis and provide the decision support for the decision makers to then make the policy as we move forward. And we're talking about 5 years ahead. That could be the picture. And the second thing is that as CORD, I think I mentioned this, that this is the first of the 3 series reports. And we looked at ecosystem, so look at the bigger picture, different actors. The other reports that will be released throughout the year, they look at the question of impact, try to quantify that as much as possible. They look at the question of environmental impact, not only the cost issue. So from that perspective, we also try to produce insights that can then help shape initiatives, Hulo per se, but also be generalizable to other types of joint initiatives as they grow. I hope.
Okay, yeah, I mean, no, thanks for that. I think that's really useful to know. I just had a quick follow-up question. So, if I'm not mistaken, COD is part of a business school set up at KLU, right? So, you know, when I look at the way Hulo is moving as a startup, you know, it seems to be following a little bit of the Elon Musk model, if I may say that as a compliment. You know, to build fast, break.
This is where you
some seed
stop
along
being
the
nice,
way.
is that right, Neil?
Yeah, I mean, you know, from a perspective of trying lots of different things, building lots of different products, etc. So, is there an element of COD's, you know, support which is going to be around how to manage the startup phase to be more clear in terms of its you know communication on its value add to the consumers, or you know, as we call it, the ecosystem or the stakeholders?
Yeah, I mean, what I can say is that we try to do research that has rigor, and then when we see that there's a positive, there's benefits, the way forwards, we highlight that. We also try to flag risks and indicate that to the community, because it's important for the humanitarian community to have these evidence-based knowledge base. It helps everybody. What we do, I hope it not only helps Hulo, but also other joint initiatives to make sure that we create an environment where people see that each initiative has its role to play. That maybe from the outside sometimes we see that they may overlap, but if you go deeper and do a little bit of more research to understand the initiatives, they fulfill a different role. Right. So, for example, there are some platforms that, as I said, they also do help facilitate resource pooling, but maybe in a short term. Hulo is a bit more strategic. So we need research there to highlight the common grounds, and where there's going to be some risks, then it's also what we try to do to highlight that. So again, to help decision makers make better decisions. And that's what academia tries to do. And I think Hulo or other initiatives, I mean, they are practitioners, so they can make decisions, they can manage the startup phase and learn by doing so. What we try to do is just to make sure that we provide insights that is evidence-based, that is based on academic rigor.
Great. Well, thanks very much.
I might just add to that a little bit as well. I think there's an element of the way in which Hulo has been set up as a cooperative, which in and of itself drives that diversification of needs. So this isn't something where Hulo is a separate entity from those users, if you like, as you articulated. They're one and the same. So the users are Hulo. And therefore they are saying country by country, this is what we want, this is what we want. Oh, well, hang on, we want this. Oh, hang on, we're really interested in waste management. Well, we want to pool trips to the airport. You know, there is that natural diversification of needs, which I think has come from not just the startup stage, as it were, but also from the very heart of the governance model. So I think that's what makes it quite interesting and probably also really hard to manage. So I'm glad I don't have to. We have one more question in the chat. Thank you very much for the online participants today. So there's a comment that in many of the humanitarian responses right now that we have a funding gap, not just for the humanitarian response, but that's also mirrored in funding logistics means. I'm sure many colleagues in the room would echo that. So could this be an advocacy point, perhaps, for advocating for pooling logistics resources where there is already a funding gap? And I'm going to be annoying and ask Jean-Baptiste to respond to that one, please, with no warning. Yeah, so the point in the chat, the question from the online participants is this a potential point of advocacy for funding of logistics in humanitarian response, where there is already a huge funding crisis for the response and de facto the logistics resources?
Thank you, Rebecca. I was not planning to talk in this panel. So I think in the story of Hulo and what we try to do with the logistic community, and not only with the Hulo members or participants, but also with the logistic cluster and all the different stakeholders, including donors, we really, since more than a decade, try to highlight the added value of professional and well-positioned logistic into the sector. And the real idea is to be able to demonstrate that by having a strategic logistic, you will gain in efficiency, in the quality of your response, and in your coverage of the needs. And so yes, I think all the different initiative, all what is done to show that logistic is important. We have seen it. Maybe it was more obvious for everyone during the COVID-19, where when the border are closed and the lockdown was all over, the huge tension that we had on supply chains and on the health systems, on the humanitarian response, and so on. So yes, supply chain and logistic is critical for the humanity, I would say, and so to consider it as a very strategic lever for humanitarian response is critical. And so that's why we did a lot of research. We try to demonstrate this ratio of 60 to 80, as well as €1 invested in preparedness can lead to 7 in response, etc. Is to show that, because it's not obvious for everyone. Usually the logisticians are more doer, not super good in communications, and so they did not value so much their value creation. And so yes, I think it's a yes.
Thank you very much, Jean-Baptiste. So to close the session, I'm conscious of the time, and thank you for everybody for the participation today, and thank you very much to my panel members for your insights. We spoke about a funding gap. Maybe you could just move forward for me one slide. And indeed, there is a substantial humanitarian funding gap worldwide. And it's therefore even more imperative that we work in a collaborative fashion to try and make the most with the resources that we have. I'm going to quote somebody from the logistics cluster session this morning, Fabrice Perrault, who's also the chair of Hulo. I really liked what you said when you said an opportunity to collaborate and cooperate, which is missed, is resource wasted. And it's not accepted, but somehow it is accepted. And it maybe shouldn't be. I also liked someone I was speaking to over lunch, who maybe I won't name, who said we just need to kind of get over ourselves and do this. You know, this is there's many reasons why we can't collaborate, but we also just need to slightly get over ourselves. We've got over the coordination hump. Now we need to get into that collaborative space to make the most of the resources that we have. So there's no doubt that together we're stronger. And that in this marketplace of just the odd 21 billion euro revenues each year that these 30 organizations represent, you can see the economies of scale that we can achieve purely by collaborating more deliberately, more strategically, and more effectively than we have been up to now. So thank you ever so much for your attention today. If you haven't had enough of yellow branding, please do come back in 30 minutes time, where we will talk to you even more and engage about digital tools and the role of digital tools in enabling greater cooperation. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of your week.